Hi, I'm Hugh Jackman.
And I'm Deborah Lee Finesse.
I'm Katie Holmes.
I'm Laverne Cox.
I'm Trudie Styler.
I'm John Leguizamo.
This September, we're joining the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment
And the New York Times.
We're going to celebrate one incredible movie, and we're all going to watch it together.
We want New Yorkers to pick the film, and the critics at the New York Times have selected 5 films to choose from.
The winning film will be screened for free this September in all 5 boroughs.
Go to the website below and vote.
Thank you so much. Thanks so much for being here.
Great to be here.
Very nice to be here.
This is inspired by the One Book, One New York campaign that was done, right? Which was a smashing success. So now you're doing one movie. Tell us how this all started.
Well, it did start based on the One Book, One New York campaign, which is a campaign that we launched at the Mayor's Office of Media and Entertainment to get all of New York City to read one book. It worked incredibly well, and we found that people really responded to the idea of a common cultural experience. So we wanted to extend that to film. So we approached the New York Times to partner with us on this project, where again, New York City will be able to pick among one of the 5 films that Tony picked, and New Yorkers will vote on it.
Tony, why these 5 films? Because there are a lot of New York movies.
There are a few, and my colleague Manola Dargis and I, we were very excited to be taking part in this project, and we said, okay, we'll make a list. We'll have a list by Friday, and we had a list of about 70 films by Friday, because it's New York has been one of the most cinematic, I would say, up there with Paris as the cities in the world that have been on film the most. But we wanted movies that could be viewed by everyone in the park.
Taxi Driver is not up here in New York. New York is up there.
That's why we're working with the city government, and it's not necessarily the image of the city. So not Taxi Driver or Midnight Cowboy. But so yeah, movies that people could bring their kids to watch in the park, and also movies that reflected, or a group of movies that reflected the diversity and variety of the city, and its people and its stories and its sounds and its music, and also of the different ways that it's been captured on film over the years. So that's where we came up with these.
How did you compile the first 70 movies, and then you started weeding them out based off of the movies that everybody could watch from the 70, or was the first 70 itself movies that everybody could potentially watch? The big long list was kind of just the brainstorm. It's like, what movies about New York do we love? And then as we kept narrowing it down, we were looking for for balance and diversity and enough of different kinds of movies, different kinds of stories, different boroughs, different populations reflected in these movies. So we were always thinking about how the list would balance out.
And that was really important to the city to, as Tony's saying, reflect the diversity of the city. So when you have a movie like Desperately Seeking Susan, directed by Susan Seidelman, we wanted to make sure that women's voices were represented in the choice. Having a director like Ang Lee with The Wedding Banquet, having Spike Lee, or Gene Kelly as a director of On the Town. So again, one of the directors we really asked on the New York Times to consider is the diversity of the city, making sure that different voices were included in different stories. And to me, one of the best summations of the project, and I'm going to give credit to Tony on this, is he said, these 5 movies are movies about dreamers. They're movies about people who have a dream that they want to realize in New York City. And so that really resonated with us, the idea that they are all pursuing this dream, and that many of these movies are about music. Music was recently added to the portfolio of our office, so it's sort of the soundtrack of the city, if you will. And again, that's something that we felt would resonate with New Yorkers.
Were you also trying to capture specific time periods of New York as well? I mean, when I think of New York, that's like a sort of neo version of the classic musical that took place in New York. On the Town is that musical in many ways. And then Desperately Seeking Susan is that wonderful period of time in the Lower East Side in the early 80s where you have incredible artists, but it's also the version that people can, families can come together and watch.
Yeah, we were definitely thinking about that, and it's one of the wonderful things about movies, especially movies that are shot on location, is whether they intend to or not,
they kind of function as time capsules, as snapshots. Some of these movies are already nostalgic. Crooklyn was made in the 90s, looking back to the 70s, and in a way, it captures the feeling and the mood of both eras. Similarly, I think New York, New York, was made in the 70s. It's about the immediate post-war era, and it also has a similar kind of double vision. So you can get a sense, right, not only of the variety of people and stories, in the city, but also, yes, how it's changed, how it used to look, what it looked like in that slightly fantastical version of it that you see in On the Town, in right after the Second World War, which echoes, with today. You still see it at Fleet Week. You still see lots of sailors riding the subways.
And some interesting trivia. On the Town was the first musical that was shot in New York City. So there's really interesting film trivia about shooting movies in New York City that each of these films embodies.
And how is it going to work? So the film is going to get chosen, right? And then there's going to be a variety of ways that New Yorkers can all watch it at the same time. What are those ways?
Well, first of all, New Yorkers can vote at nyc.gov/onefilm. So we encourage people to come out and vote. You can vote on your phone. It's very easy.
Just so everyone knows, I voted for The Wedding Banquet by Ang Lee. Just letting you know.
And then on September 6th, we will announce a winner. And then on September 13th, there will be public screenings in public parks in every single borough and in independent movie theaters, because one of the policy reasons that the city got behind in terms of doing this project, first of all, is it can be cost prohibitive to go to the movies if you're taking your children to the movies. And so we really, in the de Blasio administration, are very focused on access and inclusion. So this is one way to get to that. And two, we really wanted to support independent movie theaters. Sadly, many of them have closed in the city. And so on September 13th, you're going to be able to see the movie for free at many independent movie theaters in every single borough. And then lastly, what I'd say from a policy perspective is that film has a way to bring people together. So certainly in these incredibly divisive political times we sadly live in, film is a great way to bring people together. We felt the same with One Book in terms of having a common conversation at the same time.
What was the book again? That was
it was Americana.
Oh, that's a fantastic book.
Which was a wonderful book, and we did events celebrating Americana for 3 months around the city. I also want to mention, I know we've got Fierstein graduate film students in the audience, which we're really excited about, that we're going to be doing some panel discussions at the school, really building curriculum around the winning film, so whatever film is going to win. We have been talking to directors, actors, those associated with each of the 5 films, and having the winning film come back.
When it came to selecting Crooklyn and New York, New York, was that really like, you can't do New York movies without having Spike Lee and Martin Scorsese, and these are the 2 movies that families can watch?
It was partly that, Mean Streets or Taxi Driver might be a little tougher. I mean, we thought a lot about Do the Right Thing, which is a great New York movie and really one of Spike Lee's greatest movies. But that was a little rough in terms of the content. And one of the nice things I think about this list, I mean, there are some very well-known popular movies here, but also there are some that aren't necessarily the obvious or the best known or the most famous choices. So Crooklyn is a wonderful movie, really a kind of very personal and tender and sweet and nostalgic autobiographical film that Spike Lee made that maybe isn't as well known, as Do the Right Thing or Malcolm X. And I think similarly with New York, New York, everyone's seen Taxi Driver. This movie kind of wasn't, I think, sufficiently appreciated when it came out, and doesn't, I think, rank high enough in the Scorsese canon. It's one of my favorites of his movies. I think Liza Minnelli and Robert De Niro are just incredible in it. But it was sort of a chance to see movies that were not maybe the best known, most familiar, most obvious, most iconic movies, but are still really great movies that everyone in the city could see.
And the choice of The Wedding Banquet to have on there is really wonderful because the Asian community is rarely talked about, I think, and celebrated in this city, and it's such a massive part of the city. And The Wedding Banquet itself, I don't think it's rarely referenced as like a New York movie, a quintessential New York movie, and it really is.
Well, and it's a movie about Asian New Yorkers and also LGBT New Yorkers, and it's I think it's sometimes hard because to be as diverse and inclusive as we want to be, because Hollywood does not have a great record of that. New York City has a much better record of being diverse and inclusive than Hollywood has of representing that. So we had to dig a little bit, but I think it's wonderful. I mean, I think the Wedding Banquet is just such an entertaining and funny and smart and humane movie. It's just I think it'll be great for audiences to rediscover it.
And one of the comments we've received on this is that people do appreciate the diversity of choices between the directors, the actors, the subject matters, and that was important. So before I mentioned Susan Seidelman, one of the things our office is really focused on is supporting women filmmakers. We have a $5 million fund for women filmmakers, and so we're really doing a lot to try to support that. And so we wanted to, again, make sure that the choices are truly reflective of what the city embodies.
How many, I have to ask this of you, it doesn't have much to do with this campaign, but how many films and television shows do you have shooting at any given time in New York City? Or at the most busy time?
Generally between 100 and 150 productions on any given day. So you can be walking around the streets of New York, and on any given day, there'll be 100 to 150 productions that are simultaneously shooting. We issue about 12,000 permits a year. And so the production is at an all-time high, and that really gave us the opportunity and the obligation, quite frankly, to make sure that we're increasing opportunity into the media and entertainment business. It's why we have our Film Fund for Women, why we're doing screenwriting contests for women, why we're doing a writing program for diverse TV writers. We're, again, really trying to break down barriers and increase opportunity.
And Tony, how many movies do you review in a year? How do you retain them? Because I walk away from interviews sometimes. If I have a few interviews in a day, people say, "Who did you interview today?" I don't remember. It just goes out. If you watch 4 movies in a day, how do you remember at the end of the year which one was your favorite?
Well, I have to go. I go back and read my reviews, sometimes over the years, I will have no recollection. I mean, it's happened sometimes that I've been, back when there were DVD stores, with my kids, and they would pick out a movie, and I would say, "I've never heard of that movie." And they say, "Well, you're quoted on this box, so you must have seen it." It's about 150 that I review in a year, probably about 250 or 300 that I see.
Why is it less that you review? Do you choose not to review sometimes?
Well, there are other reviewers. I mean, there's Manola Dargis, my partner as chief critic. So we split up, and there are. I mean, talking about movies in production, there are almost 1,000 movies released on New York screens in a given year, and we review as many of them as we can. There are too many for us to review all of them. So, when it's 10 best list time, I have a raw list of 900 movies to choose from. 150 of them I've reviewed, and then there are all of the other ones. I can't watch all of them, but I try to watch as many as I can. I do like watching movies. It would be a horrible job if I didn't.
Have you ever found yourself watching a movie so bad that you rethink your career?
Yeah, no, that happens. That happens a lot. That happens on a weekly basis sometimes when I just think, what am I doing? How is this a way to make a living? But then, on the other hand, within a few days or a week or so, something will come along that will revive my energy and restore my spirit and make remind me that actually it's a pretty good job.
100%. It's the best job out there. You mentioned that independent movie theaters have closed in the past few years, but some have opened, and these retrospective theaters are sort of becoming a bit of I don't want to say a trend. There's like 2 new ones, right? Maybe 3, but it's pretty incredible. They're beautiful theaters. The Metrograph, the Quad, Film Forum is always just the best theater there is. Have you noticed the trend? Does it seem like more people are going to see old movies?
No, we're really pleased with the opening of the Quad and the Metrograph, and they've had a terrific response, and we want to do everything we can from the city side to support them. But at the same time, both independent movie theaters and the larger chains are under tremendous economic pressure at the moment, and it's because of the way that we now watch movies. So many of us are watching on a device rather than going into the movie theater. And so having a program like One Film, One New York, where people can go to these these independent theaters. They can watch the screening, or they can go to the public park, is again a way to make sure that New Yorkers are familiar with the local theater and are supportive of it.
I mean, I've been very encouraged in the last few years to see not just the opening of the Metrograph and the restoration and reopening of the Quad, and new places like Alamo Drafthouse in Brooklyn. But one thing that I've noticed, I mean, I don't have data, but I've definitely kind of anecdotally noticed, is that the audiences going to see, especially revivals and retrospectives, are getting a lot younger. And I think that, the younger generation, just as they've, rediscovered or kind of helped to revive vinyl records and actual printed books, are very interested in the theatrical experience. So, I mean, this summer there have been revivals all over the place, in Astoria, at the Museum of the Moving Image, at Film Forum, at Metrograph, at BAM, that have shown movies that you could watch, that you could stream at home, that anyone could watch at any time. But large groups of young people go out and see them because they want, I think, the experience. They want it to feel special. And I think that what we're doing with this one film program is to try to capture and encourage and sort of expand that sense of specialness. That yes, you could watch this on your phone, but why not watch it in the park with your friends and neighbors?
And then have a conversation about it.
Right. Let's get some questions from the audience. Who's a question?
Hi. Thanks for being here. So I was wondering, how does somebody prepare for a career as a film critic? And then as a critic, what percentage do you think you are reporting on the culture, or how are you influencing the culture?
That's a very good question. The answer to the first question is just fail at everything else. But
same goes for this job right here, actually,
right.
too.
Just basically, what are you good at? I'm good at watching movies. Okay, well, I mean, I seriously though, I think the way that I prepared for it, although I didn't necessarily set out to do it, was just reading and writing as much as you can, and being as curious and open about a particular art form, but also just about the world that it's part of. As for the second question, I think it's a very fine line. I mean, you want to be receptive to all of the information that's coming around, and in a way, sort of open your mind and open your eyes to all of the information that a movie might bring to you. On the other hand, your job is to make an argument, to make a judgment, to have a point of view, and I don't know whether it's how much it really shapes or influences the culture, but you want you want to at least persuade people to listen to what you have to say, and you want to interpret what you've seen for your readers.
Next question.
Hey guys, so I was just wondering, for each of you, what would you say is your favorite film that perfectly portrays New York City?
Oh gosh.
It has to be one that's not on the list, right?
Oh, I would say, it's hard to narrow it down to one, but a couple years ago, the great documentary filmmaker Frederick Wiseman, whose next film is going to be about the New York Public Library, which I'm very eager to see, made a film called In Jackson Heights, about the neighborhood in Queens. And the way he makes his films is he just kind of goes around and shoots reality and shoots life. And there's no narrator, there's no interviews. He's not kind of making a point or pushing an issue or even in a way telling a story. He's just kind of observing the texture of life. And I don't think I've ever seen a movie that felt, at once so familiar, so kind of reflecting of the city as I know it and as I've lived in it and as my family has lived in it for generations. And also as revealing of things that I didn't know, of sort of showing me a neighborhood, not too far from where I live, that was both familiar and different. So in Jackson Heights, if you can get a chance to see that, it's a really it's an incredible movie.
Well, it's interesting because one of the things that we often hear about is when people are shooting in other locations and they're trying to replicate New York City. A movie like The Departed, and I always like to quote that, which is supposed to be portraying Boston, but was shot here. That, again, is something where we're very proud of that fact because what we always like to say in our office is that there's no place like New York to shoot. The iconic locations, the workforce, I mean, everything. There are neighborhoods in New York that look like nothing else. And so when you have a movie like that, I think it's really emblematic of that.
Are you saying your favorite New York movie is?
I like The Departed, and no, but I think the fact that it was shot here again is, I think, really unique. That we're able to, in New York, portray so many different types of scenes. But then, of course, you always have classic, iconic New York movies: Manhattan, Annie Hall. There's so many.
I think I have time for one more.
Hi. So going off that question, how do you feel about movies that take place in New York but are not shot here or shot in other locations?
Well, that's always unfortunate, and we want to bring them back home. I can tell you that there were 336 movies that were shot in New York last year. There are 57 TV episodics that were shot. We have never had more production in New York than we had last year, so we're on a major uptick, and all signs point that it will continue that way. But to the extent that other productions are going elsewhere and replicating New York, we think always that's, unfortunately, we want to change that dynamic.
I would say my favorite example of that is the Jackie Chan movie Rumble in the Bronx, which was shot in Canada. And there's one scene where you see actually snow-capped mountains in the background, which is something I've never seen in New York.
Thanks so much for being here. It's a wonderful opportunity. I can't wait to sit and watch the Wedding Banquet, which I'm banking for. But I'll watch any of these. When does the vote end? And how should people vote again?
It ends at the end of August. So you can vote through August, and again, you can go to nyc.gov/onefilm, and you can vote right now on your phone.
Please do go vote, and then tune in for the film on September 13th. Right?
Right.
Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you. It was fun.